Let's bring in Political Editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew, we're talking last hour, of course, about Liddell, because all the talk's been about Collinsville, but that might be somewhat of a quixotic attempt. Liddell a lot more likely to get some sort of funding. What's the latest you're hearing on this?
Well, you had John Barilaro on last hour, and it was quite interesting, I thought, Tom, that he said to you that he was in favour of extending the life of the plant. Angus Taylor, behind the scenes, the Energy Minister, has been pushing for this, but the State Minister, Matt Keane, and the company in charge of the plant, AGL, are very much against it. And we revealed last month that a task force involving federal and state bureaucrats had found that to extend the life of the plant from 2023 to 2026 would cost $300 million and would have to be subsidised by the federal and state government. State government apparently not very keen unless you're John Barilaro. Now, apparently last night Mr Barilaro had dinner with the CEO of Tomago, the aluminium smelter serviced by Liddell, 1,100 jobs involved there, and he was told that without that extension from 2023 to 2026, the future of Tomago would be in trouble. That's in the seat of Patterson, which Labor holds by 5%, and not far from Joel Fitzgibbon's seat, which he nearly lost to One Nation of Hunter. So quite an interesting situation here. I think the argument put to Mr Barilaro was there's a 3-year gap there before renewables and gas and everything else can catch up if you close this power station and before Snowy Hydro comes on stream and helps the electricity grid in 2026. Let's hear what John Barilaro said to you about his support for a possible extension.
When our network relies on a large consumer of energy like Tomago smelter in the Hunter to switch off and switch down so that we don't black out Sydney in the summer, when we have that sort of arrangement in our network, we have, of course, a policy failure. We will need Liddell to continue on. There is a gap that is coming that you can't firm up with renewables. We won't have any new gas generators built in that time, even though there's possibility for some to be built off the back of maybe Narrabri and if Santos' project gets up.
So the debate here centres around, obviously, reliable baseload power with Liddell potentially out of the mix. What AGL has said to do with this power station is they want their own plan. It'll be gas, it'll be renewables firmed up as well. So far the government said, we're not entirely convinced you'll deliver this. So that's kind of the debate here, right? AGL's not saying they wouldn't replace it with anything, but is their plan a viable one is what the government's pushing back on.
Yeah, and that's the pressure that Angus Taylor's putting on. I think he's saying in terms of the task force, either give us an extension of Liddell or show us how you are going to replace that energy. Otherwise, New South Wales will be in trouble, both in terms of the supply and reliability of energy and the price of energy. So it shapes as an election issue. A lot of people have pointed out that it was a little bit cynical that the 2023 extension, when that went through, was just after the next state and federal elections are due. But that doesn't mean this issue won't feature in the campaign if those governments don't have a solution by then.
Well, exactly, and it'd need to be well and truly in place before those elections. The other fascinating aspect we're talking about today, Andrew, is of course, the last federal election, Adani was seen as a big issue. As soon as the election ended, suddenly Anastasia Palaszczuk had a very different view on it, and lo and behold, the environmental approval process wasn't getting held up. Interestingly enough, she must think the Collinsville power station would not go the same way. She indicated today she would have perhaps a bit of an issue with that, and that might be a bit of a go slow as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost history repeating itself. And one Nationals MP at the federal level said to me today that they could see this as another Adani that they could whack Labor in Queensland with, particularly in the context of the state election. Now, one senior Labor MP's put it to me that the reason Anastasia Palaszczuk is taking the stance she is on Collinsville, which Scott Morrison has put $4 million towards a feasibility study for, is that the project is, according to this MP, quote, nuts. And there's laughter, quote, from the business community whenever they're asked about the prospect of investment for it. Let's hear what Palaszczuk said about it this morning on Sky News.
Usually the market decides if another coal-fired power station is required, but the feasibility study would have to look at a whole range of impacts, including what impact that would have on the Great Barrier Reef. And I think everybody here knows too that the Great Barrier Reef is not just a national icon, it's an international icon.
OK, so is there a chance that you could block it as the Premier on environmental grounds?
Oh, well, actually it's federal legislation So what I'm saying is, I'm happy to have a look at the feasibility study, but I don't even have the details of the feasibility study. So let me have a look at those in the first instance.
Collinsville, Tom, is in the state seat of Bertigan, which Labor holds by 1.4%. There are a couple of other seats nearby they hold by less than 5%. So, well, you might ask, why is Anastasia Palaszczuk taking this stance, expressing cynicism about the project? Why isn't she supporting it and the jobs that would come with it? Well, one reason put to me by Labor sources this morning is the upcoming by-election next month in the seat of Currumbin on the Gold Coast. And that seat, there was a Greens vote last time of 12%. There's only a 3.3% margin the LNP has there. A bad result for the LNP. Labor see as a way of potentially putting enormous pressure, if not forcing out Deb Frecklington, and having the LNP in chaos just a few months before the state election. So you can see there's political motivation on that front for Palaszczuk to make the comments she did this morning.